Welcome to the March 13th bhyve production user call. We have Andrew, Jan, Hans, Ed, John, Dan, Daniel, and myself, Michael. And quick thank you for those who have participated in the production user feature incubation, for lack of a better term. Let's see, a $500 contribution rolled in last Friday. That made my week, and that's been going to developers doing great things. We discussed the AMD RX exciting new 9070 GPU. Alexei has access to one and was surprised to see the reset bug there. He may roll in a little later. For those who missed it, Mark Linneman produced a patch QA tool to smoke test patches that are in bug tickets to at least see if they still apply and build on FreeBSD current. So he's been very active in attending, but then got this out the door and vanished. Hopefully he'll join us again for an update. And we have a ZFS question that can wait for perhaps next week's talk. Emil has a VirtIO update, but has not been able to attend. And Ed Mast has kindly joined us and has some feedback from others on sort of the state of bhyve, if I read you correctly. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, just some notes on potential work that the FreeBSD Foundation has heard about interest through sources other than this call or the enterprise working group. Just some discussions that we've been in. And projects that we've been looking at potentially putting some work into. I think to date, broadly speaking, the foundation hasn't been looking at base bhyve functionality work. So I mean, I think there's a fairly large list of things that that we know need to move forward in basic bhyve infrastructure. Right now, none of those are on the foundation's radar as far as funded projects. I mean, I think the case could be made to look at some of that, but it's not something that has been on there to date. I think broadly speaking, bhyve manageability is where interest is, and so we are in the progress of funding some work on LibVirt, on bhyve's LibVirt's bhyve backend. Basically, just no specific bugs in scope or anything right now. It's just sort of general maintenance and integration type work. So that has come up across several different sources, identifying that as kind of a need for. It's not necessary that LibVirt is involved in the bhyve management story, but there are a lot of folks that I've been speaking to that want to either use virt-manager or basically wanted to use bhyve as a drop-in, not a drop-in replacement, basically, but like want to take a virt-manager plus libvirt plus kvm use case and do the exact same thing on bhyve and FreeBSD. So so that's something that we're specifically looking at now. So that's LibVirt work to support that. I mean, we'll certainly end up trying virt-manager and see how things are, and depending on how well that works, maybe there's not much to do there, or maybe that turns into another project that needs additional work afterwards.
And a quick point, I believe it's virt-manager just had a 5.0 release, which may be a good excuse for taking a peek at what's going on there. Continue.
I think that's probably the highlights. I mean, I'm certainly interested in any kind of feedback or on bhyve funded efforts that others are interested in or are taking on, or that we can support. I'm happy to have that discussion as well.
Well, hopefully the incubation I just mentioned will
Yeah,
provide you things on a silver platter so that the research is done and the clear goals are set out rather than, oh, let's make it more manageable, which is a very vague notion. I'm not accusing anyone of using that, but we'll just make it
yeah,
simple, small, concise, and that's proving so far so good. And I look forward to the first
yeah.
clear major
Certainly,
project ahead. Go ahead.
certainly, I get the sense that, and this isn't just bhyve, like there's a lot of things in FreeBSD that are sort of like this, where we have, there's some third party software in our ports collection, and there's some level of support for FreeBSD that third party software has, but when you start digging into it, it's the last kind of experience you can find with it is someone trying a version from a couple of years ago or something, and it mostly worked, but there were a few rough edges. And so certainly being able to just do a survey and say, like, what is the actual state of these things on FreeBSD today is really useful to know.
While it's a bit off topic for hypervisors, Samba keeps coming up, and some people live and die by it in their products and services and environments, but that's for another day. Trying to think of other examples, and I certainly welcome the group to think of examples of components that are actually documentation for things like CUDA support. We had a great demo of CUDA support, and then it's often a documentation question rather than a code question. So let's find that balance of getting the word out, getting that sort of supply demand of, well, we have these nice things, but even a lot of the people here aren't quite aware of the wonderful things we've got. I discover stuff all the time. Anyway, well, Ed, you are absolutely welcome anytime, and you're welcome to stay. Maybe we can segue into Daniel's well-formatted VirtIO question. Does that work for everybody? Daniel, what you got?
Oh, this has been a question that I've had since the 2019s.
Mhm.
So there's specific trip wires where if you install a 2.new version of the the VirtIO disk drivers, um, things don't work. And the net driver, I'm not sure because old versions are buggy. This is obviously for Windows. The Linux, I've never had a problem with the Linux VirtIO driver. But yeah, for um, we'll put the word Windows in
Oh,
here.
you
Confusing
beat me to
everyone.
it. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, so basically, so something that I've seen is installing WireGuard on Windows on a Windows VM in bhyve. Um, if you use the package, the VirtIO package for that where the disk driver works, that version of the network driver, WireGuard complains that it's too old. So therefore, the recommend, I would imagine that I'd want to install a newer version of that VirtIO net driver. But if I'm using VirtIO block, which by the way, I'm using vanishingly rarely these days now that the NVMe driver is so good. Um, but yeah, just the question is, what's the deal with compatibility? Can anybody explain why they stopped working after a certain version? Um, and is that something that's on the rainy day list of something a developer is might fix?
I know these documents have one of the two bugs where it was something on a length or a reported value. It would take a little spelunking, but the fact maybe a search of Red Hat would find it. Now, you bring up a good point that why are those not a la carte? I know they do an ISO of everything you could ever want, and it sounds like you're needing to cherry pick different versions to get it working. Is that accurate?
I mean, I'm not suffering with the
Hmm.
with the wrong version. And for the record, I think I have used the newest version of the VirtIO net driver all over the place. And like I said, in 99% of my situations, I'm using the NVMe driver, even on Rust.
Yep,
It's
yep.
just such a good, it's just such a good driver. It's just
Thank
so
you, Chuck.
clean, works, no install,
Correct.
but I have run into those situations. So when asking other people's questions about it and stuff like that, oh no, you need whatever it is, 1.0.8 point blah blah blah, or else everything will explode in a fabulous array of light and sound.
Correct. And that's the latest VirtIO net driver from Red Hat with the latest WireGuard package. Like you're facing that here and now. One can go reproduce it.
No, the net driver seems to work
Okay,
fine
good. Got it.
across the board. Yeah. Yeah,
Good.
the net, and I want to confirm that because I have no idea. And I think it's reasonable for me to be worried that one of the other drivers in that package are not good. The newest versions aren't good in bhyve, since the disk driver explodes.
I think the last time I looked at VirtIO net, FreeBSD bhyve is missing the dual channeling. We only support one thread within the code, I believe.
Hmm. But it doesn't break the driver, right? As far well, I can't attest to that. I should check. Maybe I should just check right now.
And
This was
I'm
about a
looking.
mucked with this, so that's just from memory.
So the bhyve VirtIO net device emulation or power virtualization provides only one receive and one transmit ring. We do not support multi-queue operation.
Yes, and much better words. Thank you.
And I think there's a admin queue as well, but that's low traffic unless you have a lot of errors which shouldn't happen. And that's one of the big performance bottlenecks in bhyve networking, that our whole, basically the API to implement a backend is implicitly one packet per VM exit effectively. So we have neither batching nor multi-queue operation there. It doesn't matter if you use netmap as your backend. Netmap can do it all, but the narrow race within bhyve is the struct of callbacks, and that does not support it. It looks like it, but in reality, it's not a scatter-gather list of Ethernet frames, but a scatter-gather list of fragmented Ethernet frames. So it's a scatter-gather list of fragments of one frame, not of multiple frames. And yeah,
So
even NetMap basically does one context switch per packet, then an memory copy between two memory mapped ring buffers, and then returns immediately.
So two questions about that. Does that have any bearing on whether or not the latest, that choosing a particular version, the driver would matter? And second of all, how does that influence, my uh, uh, expected performance or functionality? I mean, I guess functionality is missing dual channeling, but how is that going to influence like a basic basic VMs like
Yes.
performance or yeah.
Yes, it matters for performance because guest drivers in the guest kernel will then basically create one thread in the kernel or whatever model the operating system uses to access this one queue, so that you do not get, basically you cannot efficiently dedicate multiple vCPUs to packet processing on a single VirtIO net. The ugly workaround would be to create like 4 of them and put them in a bonding driver in Linux, or in a link aggregate driver in FreeBSD, or trunk on OpenBSD, and then yeah, it's not reasonable to do, but it would help a bit if you have enough
So,
flows.
So Jan is
no.
point about possible workarounds, but it's rather it might be esoteric, but trying to run 100 gig into a VirtIO net VM is almost useless.
I'm more talking about more than one, around 10-ish is the problem. So you max out around 12 to 15 gigabits on a reasonably fast desktop workstation CPU with normal Ethernet 1.5 kilobyte MTU, doing nothing with the traffic other than like running hyper-free.
Understood.
That's not 100 gig, it's more like going above 1 gig, which is the problem. And that's home lab toy territory these days.
I found the previous issue, Daniel, where there was a breakage in the just grabbing the storage driver, but not networking. So,
Right, I remember those days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one should use SR-IOV, should they not? And actually, John, I know you've had some adventures in, say, trying to have a MAC address follow a migrated system, and that the pass-through needs to be torn down in ways that might not be needed on other systems. What have you experienced in that department, and what would you like to see?
What I would like to see is what I haven't had a chance to work on, but I'd love to see dev control fully support the dynamic creation and deletion of VFs, and with the ability to set the MAC to use on that VF.
And Ed, are you familiar with virtual functions in SR-IOV NIC hardware and drivers?
Not sufficiently, no.
John, could you give the elevator pitch on what's going on there? And
So the thing
how's
is,
it
we
doing?
have an IOVCTL command to configure the IO virtualization of network cards.
Yes,
but as it's implemented,
it's not
usable.
Of a VF with a MAC address specified.
Mm-hmm. You can configure it if the driver supports that, but to change your configuration, so if you want to shut down a virtual machine on one host, migrate its configuration to another host, you replicate the data sets and so on, everything is fine, you want to start it. Now you have to reconfigure the other host's virtual function. You edit the config file, you apply it, and what happens is the whole virtual function configuration gets deconfigured. All your other virtual machines crash, potentially the host as well, and then you reconfigure all virtual functions.
I agree with you. It's not usable. It doesn't work.
Yeah, the interface exists, but the semantics are just not usable. It must not affect other virtual functions.
Individual VF.
Okay, repeat that, John. It's John's topic.
You need to be able to target an individual card and an individual VF.
I think an individual card is possible, physical card, but not helpful to you.
Well, the pair of the two, eh? Okay. And John, you thought you might take a stab at that at some point when the round 2 it's land in the mail?
Yeah, I'll get to it one year. But it wasn't trying to be flippant, but that's the way it is.
Well, but that's also where Ed kindly mentioned that the foundation is looking for opportunities. If the problem can be clearly defined, and perhaps you refer to other systems that get it right. I mean, for example, does KVM, QEMU, KVM get it right? Or
I have this working on Linux-based systems. And it was actually porting that system over to FreeBSD to use bhyve when I basically ran into this issue and realized it didn't work correctly.
Now, not that we're here to try to, well, it would take a clean room, but can you point to that code or feature or description of what it is, or is it spread over many
I'm
different
happy
things?
to send you some examples.
Well, that would be great. Thank you.
dig-
You are the subject matter expert on what you are experiencing. And you have to explain it to us really slow because we're on the outside. Anyway, thank you, John. And we'll just kind of watch that. And thanks for joining. It's been a minute since you've had a chance. And I trust I shouldn't ask about VM specific NFS clients. That was another cool project you had
Yeah,
in the back of your head.
it's on my back burner. Just lack
I
of.
hear you. I hear you. Well, Dan and Andrew and others, Richard, any other topics to bring up? Hans, has this inspired anything?
Not from me.
Not from me either.
It's your call, not mine, despite appearances. Well, if we were to tighten up this simple list of things, be it documentation or otherwise, that would be a huge step forward. And it's a friendly reminder that not all of these things are super complex or require the Intel thick virtualization book and guidelines, such as passing a string back to the VM that's slightly different. That's like CS 101. So, Hans, thank you for investigating the CPU ID issues and politely reaching out to folks who used to frequently attend this call. I would love to have them back. Feel free to extend that invitation. The early docs will show Patrick's extensive participation. I'm glad they've met their needs and moved on to other things. Other topics, questions, concerns, ideas, funny jokes. Otherwise, I think we've covered some good ground with a little follow-up. We'll just keep it moving. Going once, going twice. I'll check the time UTC. Does someone want the honors? And again, sorry about the time change. I think we have about 4 weeks of mismatch, and I'm sorry if you're a little early, a little late. From IP link tap down. John, what you got on IP link set dev? That's a syntax for
That's
Linux KVM.
yes. So, for instance, you can have a device and you can
Fantastic.
set its MAC address.
Boom. Let me get that in there because just vocalizing it is step one in all of this. Come on, little computer. KVM syntax.
Does it truly show up as a tab device, or is that just your variable name?
I'm just looking. I have two sets of code, one that supports taps and one that supports VFs, and that's the tap side of it.
Because you can change the tab MAC address, and yes, bhyve will then emulate yet another one. So setting it on the device isn't the proper place. You can configure it on a VirtIO net device in bhyve. But it's only the default MAC address. The guest, of course, can send spoofed MAC addresses. So it doesn't help you if you don't trust your guests. And it doesn't help you at all with virtual functions.
And if we had a magic wand, would that fix be in IOV CTL or dev CTL?
IOV CTL, I would argue, but maybe John knows more.
The second one that I just posted, that addresses a VF.
The MAC tap?
The second one that I just posted.
Oh, posted in chat. Got it.
So the IP command, you address the interface you specify which VF on that interface you want to set, and then you set the MAC on it.
What is happening?
I think IOV CTL is the closest FreeBSD equivalent, but as explained by John, it's just not usable in its current state for his use case where he has to change the configuration of one virtual function without disturbing the others.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you for vocalizing that. My chat has gone into some weird mode selection, but that's a me problem, not you. Anything else, or shall we call it good? And thank you, Ed, for dropping in. Always welcome. You are always welcome. Who would like the honors?
Like and subscribe.
Thank you, Jan. Take care, everyone. I'll be around a few minutes, and this was a great discussion. Bye.